I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so I thought dressing like a pimp might make it a little bit easier. I have blogs where you can read stuff and see things and interact with me. My main one is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com. My writing one and sort of diary blog is over at talesofgrim.wordpress.com. Hope to see you there. I am incredibly picky when it comes to horror. I'm mostly hypothetically a fan of horror as a genre. For the most part, I find that it's just full of cheap jump scares and nonsense, and the plots are obvious, and it's just, most of it doesn't do anything for me. So I'm really a fan of horror in the sense that I see the potential in it and a very few gems, but otherwise not so much. And this is true regardless of the medium, whether we're talking about books or comics or films or video games. So here's 5 video games that I think actually do it okay. Silent Hill's an interesting one. The technology, I feel, perhaps wasn't necessarily there until Silent Hill 2, and I'm kind of talking about the whole series, but there have been missteps along the way. However, the impact of that first Silent Hill, playing through that with a friend on the PlayStation, staying up through the night to play it, it was extremely effective in evoking an atmosphere, even with the crude polygonal graphics that were the best you could really manage at the time. In its own way, it was as effective as that Metal Gear Solid game when that came out for the PlayStation. It really pushed that platform to its limits and showed the kind of atmosphere that you could create with a little bit of effort. And the main thing that for me helped create that spooky atmosphere to the point where I started feeling cold from the effectiveness of it was the mist. Now, we all know that's to do with draw distance and so on, and it was brought in very close to you when you were outside and wandering around Silent Hill, but it was that mist, regardless of whatever technical issues were also at play, that really gave it a chilling, unique, horrifying atmosphere. It just goes to show how limitations can really bring out the best in some things. Splatterhouse has come out on various platforms in various guises. There was a not very good 3D remake not so long ago, but the original, at least as an arcade game, was hugely effective, and I would have pumped as many pound coins as I had into that machine when we went to the bowling alley or the ice rink in Basingstoke, and I would have played that to death rather than bowled or gone ice skating quite happily. You know, that's what I would have preferred to do with my time. Now, it's more of a side-scrolling beat-em-up, but it was genuinely grotesque at the limits of these lovingly created graphics could really go, this kind of hand-animated style. And when you did hit things, there was a real visceral sense of impact from the combination of the graphics and the sound that was genuinely grotesque and satisfying. So while it might be more of an action game, a beat-em-up game, than a horror game, I think the horror aesthetic really did come through, and it was deeply satisfying to splat some bug into the wall with a broken board and watch its body burst apart. Speaking of grotesque satisfaction, Manhunt was another really surprisingly effective game, and one that caused a huge amount of fuss and controversy at the time for its unflinching and almost fetishistic treatment of violence. Obviously, it's just a game, but putting you in that position, making you do these horrible things, using things like plastic bags to suffocate people, and so on. The care you had to take in manoeuvring around the map and everything that you did, it all came together very nicely, and that sense of horror did come through when your character was forced to do these horrible things throughout the game. And that's a kind of horror that I think is very difficult to do now, not because it's necessarily difficult to present on screen, but there will always be some wanker that takes it the wrong way, and there'll always be some other wanker who claims that the game made them do whatever it is, or it's some kind of evil influence or whatever else. So we're missing out, I feel, on that kind of horror, at least to an extent. There are things that might be spiritual successors, but for sheer grotesquerie and satisfaction in violence, Manhunt was really good. Changing pace a little, there's Alan Wake. Now, this is a weird one to put on the list because I didn't particularly like Alan Wake as a game, but it was undeniably effective, and it plays most of all like a Stephen King novel, and I'm not particularly a fan of King. He's okay. I think he's a bit overrated. Whatever, he should go back on the drugs, that's when the good stuff happens. But that's what it feels like, and it definitely brings across that kind of horror aesthetic, and it never leaves you feeling really settled at all. Not for long, anyway. And that's good. So it's effective at building atmosphere and so on, and that side of it is really good. But just as a game, it didn't really click for me, and I'm not a fan of King. But it's undeniably effective at what it does, and I can see that, even if it's not for me. Lastly, there's a game we're never, ever going to see, unfortunately. It was a cooperation between Guillermo del Toro and you-know-who, the mastermind behind Metal Gear Solid, he whose name cannot be mentioned for fear of invoking the wrath of Konami. And they put out a demo, or a demo was released at least, of the project they were working on, which was called Silent Hills, but this wasn't called that. It was just called PT, really. And all it is a looping corridor, and all you can really do is walk up and down it to a limited extent, and each time you go around the loop something changes, sometimes subtle, sometimes drastic. You can investigate, stop, look, consider the details, and it's got that very slow, very effective surreality and build to it. A lot of games aren't subtle, a lot of games on this list aren't subtle at all, but PT held so much promise and was so effective in and of itself as a kind of unsettling, surreal short film with some interactive elements even. I really wish we'd have got to see the final version of what they were going to do, but unfortunately we're just not. But if you can get hold of the demo, good luck. It's well worth a look, even just watching a playthrough, because it is like a short film. Well, that's that. Maybe I'll look at books or films or something next. Let me know what you'd like to see. Zang.
Do you like t-shirts?
Yeah, boy!
Do you like games?
Certainly.
Are you perhaps a little bit kinky?
Yes, quite.
Then buy one of our B&D t-shirts at Teespring. Teespring.com/stores/postmortem-studios. You want to be cool, don't you?
Does the word duh mean anything to you?